Okay, guys, let's get going. Phones face down, tabletop, please.
You know you blew up when I went in Russia's Spain. This guy, White Castle, hasn't
Well, haven't they seen it on like TV or something? Miss Kramer.
Okay, guys, it should not take us 4 minutes to be ready for class. Stewie, we're still not ready. Thank you. Please don't lean back because you pull off the trip. Alright, so today, and I apologize, I forgot to change the title on here because last time I taught this, oh, come on. Alright, so we're talking about conditional statements today. So you should be following along on your note sheets. Conditional statement is a statement that can be written in the if-then form. So if you buy a car, then you get $1,500 cash back. So an if-then statement has two different parts, right? What would you say the two different parts are up here? What are the two different parts of our if-then statement?
Buying the car and getting cash back.
Say that again, Kat.
Buying the car and getting cash back.
You buy a car and then you get cash back, right? We have kind of two different parts. Well, those two different parts we actually are going to call our hypothesis and our conclusion. So if-then statement is written in the form if P then Q. So you want to make sure you put down the symbolic notation because we're going to get more into this tomorrow. If P then Q, because we have this little arrow that's actually a statement. And we will talk more about that part tomorrow, but just in case you need to see that. So hypothesis is the phrase immediately following the word if. It's our conditions. It's what has to happen. So it's the conditions, if you think about it. Then the conclusion. It's the phrase immediately following the word then. So our conclusion is the result, or a lot of times it's the word we're defining. So it's our result. Very important with our hypothesis and conclusion, neither one of them include the words if or then. If and then are not a part of the hypothesis and conclusion. They are connecting pieces. They're the connecting pieces. So do not include your if and then in your hypothesis and your conclusion. All right. So we have a conditional statement here. If points A, B, C, or points A, B, and C lie out, then they are collinear. So we said our conclusion is the result, or what we're defining here. So then you see a vocab word up there that we talked about in geometry. Your hands, collinear, yes. Collinear is up there, right? Collinear is a word that we've defined, so that's what we're trying to get to, right? That's our result. So our result or conclusion in this statement, what would be our conclusion here? And what two words do we not include in our hypothesis and our conclusion? If and then. So what is our conclusion? What's the result here? They are collinear. They are collinear is my conclusion. They are collinear is the conclusion. That's what's going to happen at the end. That's going to be our result. What is the hypothesis, the conditions? What has to happen first in order for me to define it as collinear? Parker? Well, what word don't we include? Yeah, we don't include if, so we start with points A, B, and C line on, that's hard to say, line on line L. So our hypothesis, or the conditions here, are points A, B, and C line Lie on line L. Oh, that's hard to say. Oops. I want to write hypothesis. How do I do? Oh, I make us say hypothesis. Hypothesis. Our conclusion is what we're defining. Our hypothesis is what has to happen before we can define something. All right, this one's a little bit trickier because it says the Tigers will play in the tournament if they win their next game. So remember, hypothesis is what has to happen first, the conditions. Then your conclusion is the result. What happens because the first thing happens. So take a minute, think about it, don't say it out loud. Think about what is going to be the final result in the statement. The Tigers will play in the tournament if they win their next game. So I want the conclusion first here. What is going to be the overall result? What's going to happen at the end after we hit some conditions? Becca. The Tigers are going to play in the tournament. That's going to be the final result, right? So we call that our conclusions. The Tigers will play in the tournament. Is it L? Totally spelling so. There we go. Conclusion. So the hypothesis is our conditions and what has to happen first. What had to happen first in order for the Tigers to play in the tournament?
To win the next game.
They win the next game. They had to win the next game first, and then as a result, they're going to play in the tournament. So this is our hypothesis. So it's not always the first part versus the second part. All right, guys, see if you can handle finding the hypothesis and your conclusion and your next one on your own. All right. And then which part is the hypothesis and which one's the conclusion? Remember your conclusion, a lot of times you can look through those vocab words or it's the result. I think it's easier to find the conclusion first because we can spot those vocab words because that's what we're defining. Remember, what two words do we not include in our hypothesis and conclusion? If and then. Do not include the words if and then in your hypothesis or your conclusion. If and then are not a part of that. Alright, raise your hand. So it says if a polygon has 6 sides, then it's a hexagon. Does anybody up there see a word, a vocab word, something that we've defined before? Parker. We have divided a polygon, but is there anything that's more specific? A hexagon. Please raise your hand next time. So a hexagon, we're defining a hexagon. It is a hexagon. What has to happen, so this, it is a hexagon, will be my conclusion. What has to happen first in order for us to figure out that it's a hexagon? What did it call? The polygon has to have 6 sides. That would be my hypothesis. That has to happen first. Teacher delivery?
Handing out last hour.
Last hour. Okay, thank you. All right. Questions on that one at all? All right. This time we actually need to write it in our conditional statement or the if-then form, right? Because there's no if-then in that statement. An angle with a measure greater than 90 degrees is an obtuse angle. So first we're going to figure out which part is our hypothesis and which part is our conclusion. Then we're going to go ahead and write it in that if-then form. So remember, we said our conclusion a lot of times is a what? Conclusion is a, what kind of statement though? Our hint was, so our conclusion is the result or it's a vocab word, one of our vocab words. So it says an angle is a measure greater than 90 degrees is an obtuse angle. So does anybody up there see anything that we've defined that would be a vocab word? Mark. Give me a little bit more. Obtuse. Obtuse angle. Obtuse angle would be our conclusion. Our obtuse angle. So is an obtuse angle would be our conclusion. That is what we're defining. We're defining what an obtuse angle would be. So what has to happen? What are the conditions in order for it to be an obtuse angle? So
Must be bigger than 90.
an angle has to have a measure greater than 90 would be my hypothesis. So we figured out which part is the conclusion, which part is the hypothesis. Now we're going to put it into our if-then form. So, oops, that's not what I want to click. So we're going to go ahead and put those keywords, what are those two keywords in our conditional statement? If and then. So we're going to put if, our hypothesis, but we need to kind of rearrange our hypothesis a little bit to make it make more sense, right? Because if I just say, if an angle is measured greater than 90, so how could I kind of state that as an easier statement? If an angle is greater than 90 or has a measure greater than 90, I kind of take either one of those. So if an angle has a measure greater than 90. We're going to put that other key word in there now. What's the other key word in our conditional form? Then. Now we can put our conclusion, the result. So if an angle has a measure greater than 90, then what's our result? It's an obtuse angle. Shad, can you please sit up so we're not sleeping? Thank you. Then it is an obtuse angle. Anyone who you're writing there? Alright. Let's try another one. So it says the length of a course for an inline skating marathon is 26.2 miles. So take a minute to think. Is there anything we could define in there? Is there anything we could give a definition for? Remember, the thing you are defining, or the vocab word in there, is going to be your conclusion. So take a minute and look at the length of the course for an inline skating marathon is 26.2 miles. Think about what you could define and give a definition for in there. So remember, our conclusion is what we're defining. Anybody else think that they can see something in there that we can define? All right, Mark, what do you think we could define? We could do the, actually we're going to cut that off a little bit. That's a little too much information, so not the full course of an inline skating marathon, but just, we're going to say an inline skating marathon, right? That's what we're defining, inline skating marathon. Inline skating marathon is going to be my conclusion. That is what I'm defining. That's what I'm going to give a definition for. So if I said, hey, I went ahead and I did an inline skating marathon, now your hypothesis is telling me, well, what did I do? What was the conditions that I had to have done in order to have done an inline skating marathon?
26 points.
A little bit more. I did more than just 26.2 miles. Did I? What 26.2 miles? You're missing something. What are we defining as an inline skating marathon? Connor?
For the course.
The length of the course is 26.2 miles. That's going to be my hypothesis. This is going to have to happen in order for me to have had an inline skating marathon. It's my conditions. So this is also part of the hypothesis. So now we figured out which part is our hypothesis and which part is our conclusion. So we're going to put it in the conditional statement. So what are those two key words we put in for our conditional statement? If and then. So if, what has to happen first? What was our hypothesis? If what? If the length of the course is 26.2 miles. What's the key word that comes up after the hypothesis? Then. So if the length of the course is 26, oops, I forgot the letter E in course. So if the length of the course is 26.2 miles, then our conclusion is what? What did we define? It is so close, an inline skating marathon. We can put in extra details, we just can't get rid of extra details. We couldn't get rid of the word inline because that's part of this, right? We have to make sure if an inline skating marathon is going to make it different than a skating marathon, right? An inline skating marathon is just like rollerblading versus being on the ice. Don't want to, take rollerblades on an ice rink, right? Why don't you guys see if you can take a go at the next one by yourselves? So remember, our conclusion is the result. What did we figure out after the first part happened? What was I able to conclude? What was my result? See if you can figure out the hypothesis and the conclusion on the next one. Remember, the conclusion is the final result of it all. Final result. What you can figure out from the first part happening will be your conclusion. This happened, so now I figure out this happened. This is the result. Alrighty. The tourists at the Alamo are in Texas. What is the result there? What did we figure out? They're in Texas. So if they're in Texas, it's going to be my conclusion because that's the final result. So what had to happen first in order for me to know that they're in Texas? Tourists, and I should have put an S in there, sorry. Tourists are at the Alamo will be my hypothesis. That's my conditions. That's what has to happen first. So conditional statements use those two key words. What do I start with? If. Every conditional statement starts with if. So if, what happens first? What did we say our hypothesis was? If tourists, what am I going to have to throw in there? If tourists are at the Alamo, we're going to have to rearrange those words a little bit. So if tourists are at the Alamo, what's that key word that comes up after that, after my hypothesis? My key word will be then my conclusion. What have I figured out if I know that tourists are at the Alamo? They're in Texas. Why don't you go ahead and try the next one? Remember, your conclusion is a vocab word. That key word but you're trying to figure out the result. Conclusion is the result, or that vocab word you're defining. So look to see if there's a vocab word in there you can define. There's a vocab word in there you can define. If there's a vocab word in there you can define. Now what has to happen in order for you to have that vocab word? What would be the definition? And remember, you can change the hypothesis around a little bit to make it make sense when you write it in your if-then form. So in this one, there's a word we could probably take out of our hypothesis when we write it in our conditional form and make it sound just a little bit better. Alrighty guys, back up here please. All 90-degree angles are right angles. What's the vocab word up there?
Right angle.
Right angle, right? So that's going to be my conclusion. Right angles is going to be my conclusion. So what has to happen in order for it to be a right angle?
90 degrees.
90-degree angles. That's what's going to be our hypothesis, right? It has to be 90 degrees. I'm spelling hypothesis wrong. No, I'm not. All right. So what is that keyword we have to start our conditional statement with? If. Now, we might have to kind of rearrange our hypothesis a little bit. It's going to sound weird if we just say if all 90-degree angles. Right? So how could I rewrite that? What word could I probably get rid of? You could get rid of all, so you could say if what?
A.
If a angle, or we say an angle, right? And an angle is what?
90 degrees.
Is 90 degrees.
Then
That keyword we're going to use there is then, comes right before our conclusion. And our conclusion, what did we define?
it is a right angle.
It is a right angle. So when we're looking for our conclusion, we're looking for the result. We're looking for something we can define. Alrighty, we'll let you guys get to work so you can ask plenty of questions. So today's homework, is anybody still writing that one down? Alright, today's homework is on page 82, numbers 3 through 5, 11 through 15, due Monday, and today nothing is due. But I would probably make sure you finish up yesterday's assignment first because that one is due tomorrow, but I think a lot of you finished it or were near finished it with it.